My name is Marin Caldwell. And this morning, I filed an eviction notice. I did it with steady hands. After a night I will not forget. And I did it without raising my voice. Last night, at my son's house, I carried a plate toward the table, like I have every Christmas of my adult life. Sloan Archer Monroe stepped in front of me, smile bright enough for a camera, and took the plate from my hands. No gifts for us. No food for you. The room froze. 23 people found something interesting to do with their eyes. My son, Caleb Monroe, studied his folded napkin like it could save him. I did not argue. I set down my fork. I said, "Merry Christmas to no one in particular," and walked out with my coat over my arm. The air cut clean and cold. In the car, I let the engine warm and my anger cool into something sharper. I drove home, made tea I did not drink, and opened my laptop. Caldwell Residential LLC bloomed on the screen. My portfolio in neat rows, the Maple Ridge address sitting there like a quiet secret. I have owned that house for years. I chose it for the light in the kitchen and for the oak in the yard large enough to hold a swing. Last night, after being told I did not qualify for dinner, I logged into the tenant portal as the owner and filed the formal notice. Electronic stamp, theme stamp, PDF to the property record, and a duplicate to the management queue. Clean, proper, legal. I closed the laptop and looked at the clock. Dawn was sliding under the blinds. Respect has a market rate. Love does not. If you were me after that table, after that sentence, would you evict? Or would you forgive? The inspection was set for 2 o'clock. I arrived early and waited across the street, watching the house I had chosen for my son's family, the one they believed was theirs. When the manager from Hartford Prime Realty, Dana Fields, arrived with her clipboard, I stepped out of the car. We walked to the porch together. The wreath on the door still bearing Sloan's flawless taste. Dana pressed the bell. Caleb opened the door. The confusion on his face shifted to alarm when he saw me standing beside a property manager. Before he could speak, Dana handed him her card and announced, "Routine inspection for the property. Mr. Monroe, this is Mrs. Marin Caldwell, the owner." The color drained from his face. I stepped forward. "Yes, Caleb, I own this house." Sloan appeared behind him, holding a mug like a prop she suddenly didn't know how to use. "You can't be serious," she said. "You live in that tiny apartment." "By choice?" I replied. "But this home, this roof, these walls, all mine." I walked into the foyer. Everything was as I remembered: the flooring I'd picked for its warmth, the paint I'd chosen for light. Sloan's voice trembled with anger. So this was a setup to humiliate us. Embarrassement recueillir surprise. I said, "I'm past that." I nodded toward the living room. "You've been paying $1,900 for a property worth $3,400. The rest was my silent gift." Dana moved through the space, documenting. Caleb whispered, "Why didn't you tell us?" I wanted to see whether love needed a receipt. I said, "Apparently, it does." Sloan crossed her arms. "That's manipulation. Respect isn't a bill I forgot to pay." I told her, "You chose the price." I looked around once more. I said I couldn't afford gifts. I never said I couldn't afford the house. That evening, I sat across from Caleb and Sloan at my apartment. The air so tight it could snap. The inspection had ended hours earlier, but its echo hadn't left their faces. I poured coffee into 3 cups, black and strong, and placed 2 folders on the table between us. The documents were plain contracts. Signatures. The numbers, but what they represented was a clean line between the past and the future. You have two options, I said. My voice was calm. Steady. The same tone I used in boardrooms when a decision needed to be made. Option 1. We terminate your lease to own agreement immediately. I'll return your deposit, give you 60 days to find another place, and provide a positive reference. You leave with your credit intact and your conscience clear. Sloane's hand tightened around her mug. Caleb's eyes flicked toward the folder but didn't reach for it. I opened the second one. Option 2. You stay. But the terms change. Starting next month, you pay market rate $3,400, not $1,900. You continue building equity, but this time through effort, not through my generosity. No more hidden subsidies. Caleb swallowed hard. We can't afford that. Then you choose option 1. I said, there's no shame in living within your means. But understand, either choice will define how we exist as a family from now on. Sloane leaned forward, the edge returning to her voice. This isn't a business negotiation. We're family. Yesterday, you made family conditional. I replied, I'm just honoring the terms you set. The silence that followed felt like a held breath. Caleb finally spoke, low and unsteady. Mom, we didn't mean to hurt you. Then prove it. I said, not with apologies, but with respect. Invite me because you want me there, not because you need a babysitter. Call me because you care, not because there's a favor attached. Sloane's eyes flickered defensive, calculating, unsure. I stood, gathering the folders. Take time to decide. But understand this, the woman you excluded yesterday is the one holding the keys today. Choose wisely. The clock ticked once, sharp in the quiet. No one moved. 2 days later, Caleb called, his voice tense. He said a man from Goldman and Associates had reached out, claiming to represent a legal firm investigating elder financial abuse. The caller mentioned my name and said the inquiry involved the property on Maple Ridge. Caleb sounded unsettled, asking if I had hired a lawyer. He hadn't. I told him not to sign or send anything until I verified the firm. By the time I looked up the number, it was disconnected. That night, the break-in happened. The back door was splintered near the lock, but nothing of value was missing. Jewelry, electronics, cash, all untouched. Only the home office had been ransacked, papers scattered, drawers emptied. The file cabinet pulled open. It wasn't theft, it was a search. Whoever came knew exactly where to look. When I arrived, police were already there. Detective Alana Ruiz walked me through the rooms. She pointed out the pattern: no forced drawers beyond the office. No fingerprints, other than family. They were after documents, she said quietly. My stomach tightened. The lease agreements, the trust drafts, every paper linking me to the ownership, they were gone. Caleb looked stunned. Sloane pale but silent. She kept glancing toward her phone as if waiting for instructions. I asked the detective to check for surveillance devices. Within an hour, the tech unit found a small camera hidden behind a decorative frame in the living room and a second one disguised inside the smoke detector. Both were transmitting wirelessly to an external source. The realization hit hard. Someone had been listening, watching, and waiting for the perfect opening. I thought I had been orchestrating a lesson in respect. Instead, we had just become targets in a much larger game. Detective Ruiz returned the next morning with updates that didn't feel like coincidences. The supposed Goldman and Associates didn't exist, but the phone records traced to a private number registered under an alias frequently used by a disbarred attorney named Evan Reddick. The name hit me harder than I wanted to show. I had seen it before on Sloane's phone months ago. In messages she'd quickly minimized when I walked into the room. Ruiz requested full access to the family's call logs. Caleb handed over his phone without hesitation. Sloane hesitated a beat too long. When Ruiz scrolled through the data, her face remained professional. But I saw the flicker of recognition. Multiple calls. Late at night. Between Sloane and Evan. Some lasted over an hour. The detective met my eyes but said nothing. Later that afternoon, I received an email from Caleb. Attached were recovered fragments from his home computer. The digital forensics team had found evidence of a keylogger. Someone had been monitoring their online activity for months. Among the recovered files were messages between Sloane and Evan. Encrypted but decoded by the tech unit, they read like strategy notes. Evan had coached her to provoke family conflict, to build a narrative that I was manipulating them financially. Once the story reached a certain level of tension, he'd present legal help, claiming elder abuse to pressure a forced sale of the house. They would then buy it quietly under a shell company. Caleb arrived at my apartment that evening, broken by what he'd seen. Sloane followed, pale and defiant, holding her phone like a weapon that had turned on her. The silence between them was sharper than shouting. She finally whispered that she had been tricked, that Evan told her the arrangement was temporary, that he was helping them secure ownership. She hadn't known the full scope, or at least that's what she claimed. I watched her carefully. Her guilt was real, but so was her ambition. I had misjudged the depth of her need to appear perfect, to control every corner of her life. I realized Evan hadn't created that hunger, he had simply aimed it. That night, I made a new decision. The lesson I planned for Sloane had grown into something far bigger. This time, my strategy would not stop at family boundaries. It would end where manipulation began. Detective Ruiz and I spent the next 48 hours building a plan that would expose Evan Reddick and the network behind him. It wasn't enough to prove he'd manipulated Sloane. We needed a trap that caught him acting on it. Ruiz called it a controlled sting. I called it justice with paperwork. We drafted a decoy document, an addendum to the existing lease, written to appear like a voluntary property transfer. The language was flawless, just the kind of bait that would appeal to a fraud posing as a savior. Sloane agreed to cooperate, whether out of fear or guilt. I didn't ask. She arranged a meeting with Evan at a downtown cafe, claiming she had the signed papers he requested. The detective team was already in place when we arrived. Ruiz sat 2 tables away with a cup of tea she never touched. I stayed outside, parked across the street, listening through the hidden mic in Sloane's bracelet. When Evan walked in, his confidence filled the room before his voice did. He praised her for handling the situation so cleanly, told her the house would change hands quietly, and promised she'd receive her share once it sold. Every word streamed directly to the police van waiting nearby. Ruiz gave the signal as Evan leaned over to sign his fake section of the deal. The officers moved in quietly, fast enough to keep the moment from turning theatrical. Out in the parking lot, Lydia Park was found in a car loaded with burner phones and a briefcase of forged property deeds. The evidence spoke for itself. That night, I withdrew the eviction notice I'd filed weeks earlier. I didn't need it anymore. I replaced it with a new agreement, one that required Sloane to repay $47,000 over time, cut all contact with Evan, and attend financial counseling under supervision. She called it cruel. I called it balance. Evan Reddick and Lydia Park were charged under federal fraud statutes within a week. The sting left no room for negotiation. The burner phones, the forged contracts, The recordings all tied them to a web of property scams stretching across 3 states. Lydia's assets were seized under RICO provisions, and Evan's license, already suspended, was permanently revoked. His arrogance had finally met something louder than his voice evidence. Sloane faced her own reckoning. She was dismissed from her agency for violating confidentiality clauses, her professional reputation collapsing overnight. The civil agreement she signed required restitution $47,000 to be repaid directly into the family trust. More painful than the money was the condition that bound her to transparency. Every financial move would be reviewed by an independent auditor until the debt was cleared. Caleb filed for legal separation soon after. He wanted to rebuild stability for Micah and Elise. Free from the noise that had defined their home, he visited often but spoke little, choosing silence as his own form of repentance. As for me, I restructured the Maple Ridge property into a trust for my grandchildren. Caleb retained the right to live there only under one clause. Respect is non-negotiable. No raised voices. No manipulation disguised as love. If broken, the house would be sold, and the proceeds would go entirely to the Children's Education Fund. On the first Sunday after the sentencing, I invited them all to dinner. The table was smaller, the silence gentler. Sloane came, subdued, wearing humility like a borrowed coat. When she whispered, "Thank you," I nodded once. Respect has a market rate. Love does not. For the first time in months, the house finally felt like it belonged to the right people. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and feel free to share your story in the comments. Your voice matters.